This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Section 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between an insurance agent and a customer making a home insurance claim. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good afternoon. Shield Home Insurance. Priya speaking. How can I help you today?
I need to make a claim. We had a burst pipe last Thursday and there's quite a bit of damage.
I'm sorry to hear that. Let me pull up your account. Can I take your full name and policy number?
It's Daniel Okonkwo. OKONKWO, policy number is SH7742291.
Got it. And the property address?
14 Ashgrove Terrace, Bristol, BS8, 4NW.
Thank you. So, a burst pipe on Thursday. Was the property occupied at the time?
No, we were away. We came back Friday evening and found the kitchen completely flooded.
Okay. Now under your policy, water damage from a burst pipe is covered under Section C, subsection 2. However, I need to flag something. Your policy has a standard excess of £350. That means any payout will have that deducted first.
Right, I was aware of that.
Good. Now, I'll need you to provide a few things. First, photographs of the damage, ideally time-stamped. Second, a written estimate from a licensed plumber. And third, receipts or valuations for any items that were damaged.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
The main things are the kitchen flooring, that was only replaced 18 months ago, the washing machine and the boiler's been damaged too. The boiler alone was quoted at £920 to replace.
Okay. The flooring and appliances would fall under contents coverage, which you do have. The boiler, however, is classed as a fixture, so that falls under buildings coverage. Both are included in your current policy.
That's a relief. How long does the claim process usually take?
Once we receive all documentation, we aim to issue a decision within 10 working days. If an assessor needs to visit, that can extend it to 21 days.
And who do I send the documents to?
You can upload directly to our portal, claims.shieldhome.co.uk, or post to our Bristol Processing Centre. The reference number for your claim is CL 8847.
CL 8847. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you and sorry for the inconvenience.
That is the end of Section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 2. You will hear a museum guide giving a talk on a new exhibition about the science of sound. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to the Sound Lab, everyone. I'm Sophie and I'll be walking you through our newest permanent exhibition, The Science of Sound. Before we explore the interactive stations, let me give you some context. Sound is produced when an object vibrates, creating pressure waves in the surrounding medium, usually air. These waves travel outward in all directions from the source. The speed of sound in air at room temperature is approximately 343 meters per second, significantly slower than light, which is why you see lightning before you hear thunder. Now, if you look at the large diagram on the panel to your left, that's a cross-section of the human ear. I'll walk you through it. Starting from the outside, sound waves enter through the ear canal and strike the eardrum, also called the tympanic membrane. The eardrum vibrates and transmits those vibrations to three tiny bones, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Together these are called the ossicles. The stapes then pushes against a membrane called the oval window, which transfers vibrations into the cochlea, a fluid-filled, spiral-shaped structure. Inside the cochlea, tiny hair cells bend in response to the fluid movement. This bending converts mechanical energy into electrical signals, which travel via the auditory nerve to the brain.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, some interesting facts about human hearing. The range of human hearing is typically 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. We're most sensitive to frequencies between 1,000 and 4,000 Hz, which, not coincidentally, is the frequency range of human speech. Above 20,000 Hz is ultrasound, used in medical imaging and by bats for echolocation. Over at Station 3, you'll find our decibel demonstration. 0 decibels is the threshold of human hearing. A normal conversation sits at around 60 decibels. Prolonged exposure to sounds above 85 decibels can cause permanent hearing damage. A jet engine at close range reaches approximately 140 decibels. Finally, a note on acoustics. Hard surfaces reflect sound, creating echo and reverberation. Soft surfaces absorb it. This is why concert halls are lined with carefully designed panels, to control how sound behaves in the space. The study of how sound behaves in enclosed spaces is called architectural acoustics. Please feel free to explore all 6 stations. Station 5 has our noise-canceling headphone demonstration, very popular. Any questions before we begin?
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 3. You will hear a postgraduate seminar discussion between 2 students, Yusuf and Inz, and their tutor, Professor Linkvist, about misinformation and platform governance. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Right. Let's move into the governance question. Yusuf, you've been looking at platform liability models. Where are you?
So, the core tension is between Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act in the U.S., which gives platforms near total immunity for third-party content, and the emerging European Digital Services Act framework, which imposes due diligence obligations on very large online platforms, defined as those with over 45 million users in the EU.
And the key mechanism in the DSA?
Risk assessments. Platforms must conduct annual systemic risk assessments covering 3 domains: illegal content, fundamental rights impacts, and, this is the contentious one, impacts on civic discourse and electoral processes.
And the enforcement gap is significant. The DSA designates the European Commission as the primary enforcer for the largest platforms, the so-called VLOPs, very large online platforms. But national digital services coordinators handle smaller services. The coordination between those two tiers is genuinely underspecified in the regulation.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Inez, your paper argues the real problem isn't liability, it's measurement. Elaborate.
Right. So, to impose meaningful obligations, you need to be able to measure harm. But misinformation harm is deeply context-dependent. The same false claim might be harmless in one context and cause significant real-world harm in another. The vaccine hesitancy literature is the clearest example. There's no agreed metric for misinformation harm in the way there is for, say, air pollution.
And that's exactly what platforms exploit. Ambiguous metrics mean self-reported compliance data is essentially unverifiable.
What's the strongest counter-argument to heavy platform regulation?
The chilling effect on legitimate speech. If platforms over-remove content to reduce liability risk, minority and marginalized voices, which are disproportionately flagged by automated systems, face suppression. The Columbia Journalism Review documented a 43% higher removal rate for content from accounts in the Global South compared to equivalent Western accounts.
Which brings us back to the auditing question. Independent algorithmic audits, with genuine access to training data and moderation logs, are probably the most tractable intervention. The DSA gestures toward this but doesn't mandate it with any teeth.
Good. For your final paper, I want you to engage with the counterposition that platforms are genuinely over-regulated relative to their ability to accurately judge truth claims. That's the strongest version of the libertarian argument you need to defeat.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. You will hear an academic lecture on plate tectonics and volcanic systems. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today's lecture covers the relationship between plate tectonic processes and volcanic activity, one of the most dynamic systems in Earth science. The Earth's lithosphere, the rigid outer shell, is divided into approximately 15 major tectonic plates and several minor ones. These plates move due to convection currents in the underlying asthenosphere, driven by heat from the Earth's core. Movement is slow, typically between 2 and 15 centimeters per year. Volcanic activity is strongly correlated with plate boundaries. At divergent boundaries, where plates move apart, magma rises to fill the gap, forming new oceanic crust. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is the most extensive example, stretching roughly 16,000 kilometers. At convergent boundaries, where plates collide, one plate is forced beneath the other in a process called subduction. The subducting plate melts as it descends into the mantle, generating magma that rises through the overlying plate. This produces some of the world's most explosive volcanoes. The Cascade Range in North America and the volcanoes of the Pacific Ring of Fire are classic examples. The third type, transform boundaries, where plates slide horizontally past each other, are not typically associated with volcanism but do produce significant seismic activity. The San Andreas Fault in California is the most studied example. Now, not all volcanic activity occurs at plate boundaries. Hotspots are anomalous regions of intense volcanic activity located in the middle of plates, thought to be caused by plumes of exceptionally hot material rising from deep in the mantle. The Hawaiian Islands were formed by the Pacific Plate moving over a stationary hotspot. As the plate moves, new islands form over the hotspot while older ones are carried away and eventually submerge. Volcanic eruptions are classified by their explosivity using the Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VEI, a logarithmic scale from 0 to 8. The 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens was a VEI 5. The 1815 eruption of Tambora, the largest in recorded history, was a VEI 7. This eruption caused the so-called year without a summer in 1816, as ash in the atmosphere reflected solar radiation globally. Finally, volcanic monitoring. Modern monitoring uses a combination of seismometers to detect earthquakes preceding eruptions, ground deformation sensors, gas emission measurements, and satellite-based thermal imaging. The key precursor to most eruptions is a swarm of small earthquakes caused by magma movement, called a seismic swarm.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
That is the end of the listening test. Check your answers. Comment your score. All the best, my dear fellow student. Your hard work will pay off one day.